Hi, I'm Corey Jones. I am the owner and chief instructor of Safety Man Consulting, safetyman.co. I focus on the 3 S's: safety, security, and survival. My goal is to make sure that you and anybody you are with, your family, your house of worship, your co-workers, anybody is safe and ready. How did I get into being safety man? Basically, I started as a law enforcement officer when I was 20 years old down in sunny Wildwood on the boardwalk. Just walking back and forth on the boardwalk, hopefully quelling problems. If there were problems, then we would have to handle them. I was only 20, I was old enough to have a gun, couldn't have a beer. Flash forward a couple years, I got hired by the Mount Laurel Police Department. While there, I was fortunate and blessed enough, talented enough too, to be promoted through a whole bunch of different ranks, from detective to sergeant to shift commander to firearm instructor to all the uses of force that we would use, from pepper spray to baton to handcuffing to taser and firearms. Then I got on the SWAT team. Eventually I progressed up the ranks of the SWAT team to run our SWAT team, and then was on the leadership board for the entire SWAT team for Burlington County. I retired in 2018, formed this company, Safety Man Consulting, with a desire to teach active shooter response to businesses, houses of worship, any place you have a lot of people. That kind of just blossomed out to where I realized that if I'm teaching you or your business how to handle an active shooter, I'm really giving you a general crisis management plan. So one of my clients, Royal Farms, I taught them how to respond to active shooting events. Then the pandemic happened, and all the information and training that I had given them for active shooter response and recovery helped them through the pandemic. And they actually wrote me a letter of appreciation, which you can see on my website, which showed exactly how Safety Man's training for crisis management actually helped them manage all their satellite stores plus their main office through the pandemic, and made it a lot easier for them to push out communication, because you got to remember, they're in multiple states. Multiple states would have different governors, would have different mask requirements, and virus mitigation requirements, eventually vaccine requirements, and so forth. So basically, I prepared them to be able to communicate effectively all that information. So the decision to actually enter law enforcement started with, my uncle was a police officer in Philadelphia from 1961 to 1991, and my cousin, who was like a brother to me, was first a Marine for 4 years, then a New Jersey State Trooper for 27 years. And my family at that time was really, really close. We all lived within about 10 miles of each other. So we spent a lot of time together, a lot of time. So I just kept getting those influences into me, hearing the cool stories of being an officer, hearing the stories from being a trooper, hearing the stories of actually helping people, solving crimes, preventing crimes, locking bad guys up, making the streets safer for my mom, for my family and so forth. So my cousin actually drove me down to Wildwood, helped me fill out gave me the application, said fill this out, and it just started right from there. So it was all those influences from just seeing the positive outcomes of officers who cared about the people that they were sworn to help. With Safety Man, the services, you don't have enough tape in your camera for me to cover all the services that I perform at Safety Man. So we'll start with where I got started, which was active shooter, active killer events, right? So I would come into your business, it could be any size, from a CVS on the corner to a 5-story building that has 3,000 employees in it, and everything in between. Schools, charter schools, alternative schools, houses of worship, any place you have people, I will come in and I will specifically design an active shooter plan for you. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we have positive accountability of all of your employees. We're going to make sure that the building is secure so we can limit who and how people can get in. We're going to train your employees to look for the signs of somebody who may be experiencing some sort of personal, financial, substance abuse, marital, some sort of problems that could be pushing that person closer to doing something violent. And then we're going to train you how to actually react. And I follow exactly what the federal government says, the run, hide, fight model, okay? At any point, at any time, you may land in any one of those 3 areas. It may be run because you hear gunshots far away. It may be hide because you hear gunshots close. It may be fight because the gunshots are so close, the bad guy is right there. You can grab an actual weapon or an improvised weapon, or use your body as a weapon to make sure that that bad guy stops hurting you, your friends, your family, or the people you're worshiping with. So de-escalation, verbal de-escalation, we're calling it now de-escalation education, is through a company called Verbal Judo. I'm an associate instructor with Verbal Judo, which is 39 years old. It was created by Dr. George Thompson. Dr. Thompson was a literary professor, a bodybuilder, a martial arts expert, and a volunteer police officer. So the story he likes to tell is his first night, he locks up 3 bad guys. He winds up having to use force on them, puts them all in the hospital. He gets called at noon the next day to the lieutenant's office. He thinks he's going to get an award. The lieutenant does not give him an award. In fact, the lieutenant says, "Don't do that again. Get out of my office." So what's missing? There was no answer. There was no way for him to be able to generate voluntary compliance from people who would otherwise not comply with law enforcement instructions. So he came up using his literary background, his experience and his training, and developed Verbal Judo. And through over 39 years, we've taught over 1 million police officers, hundreds of thousands of private companies from Fortune 100, 500 companies. We're in other countries, we're in every continent, teaching people to generate voluntary compliance. We want to increase safety, reduce liability, and improve outcomes, interpersonal outcomes, by using professional language. So a glaring red flag is one of the 5 universal truths of Verbal Judo is people would rather be asked than told to do something. So that's one huge thing. If you notice the places that you like to go to, there may be a subconscious reason that you like that. And I guarantee it's just the demeanor of the people or person that you're dealing with. You know, how may I serve you today? When you go to Chick-fil-A, they really stress that interpersonal communication at Chick-fil-A. And a lot of other restaurants, the smaller restaurants, are starting to catch up. So to your question, what would be a glaring error is just that initial contact with the person at the location that you're arriving at. Are they pleasant? Are they smiling? Are they looking at you? Do they seem that they're at least empathetic? Do they want to help you? Okay, so we have a survival tactics course, survivaltacticscourse.com. Myself, a former SWAT commander, paired up with 4 retired Navy SEALs, one of which is actually now an attorney, one is doing really well as a real estate agent, another one has a private company where he actually builds gas stations. But they still train, they still shoot, they still remember all their tactics. I also have on my team an Army Ranger and United States Marine, all retired. So together, we take all those skill sets, those warfighters who are over in foreign countries, rescuing hostages, capturing high-value targets, owning areas, doing all those things, pairing that up with my training as a New Jersey law enforcement officer, having to follow the United States Constitution, the laws of the state of New Jersey, and the Attorney General's guidelines on use of force. We're putting that all together to give private citizens who are legally armed the knowledge, skills, ability, and training to protect themselves and their family members in the event they have a home invasion or some other violent event takes place. Yeah, this survivaltacticscourse.com is for anybody to come. We encourage families to come. The last class we taught in April, we had a husband and wife come. The next class, we're going to have a bunch of realtors come. We actually have a lot of corporate events where some top performers, instead of sending them to some corporate location where they just get drunk and eat a lot of food, they come here. They can learn teamwork, they can learn accountability, they can learn handling adversity, and they can learn skills that they can use at any location, whether it be an active shooter or, heaven forbid, someone who is in their house trying to do them or their family harm. The first thing to help a school secure itself is to pay attention to your students and what's going on in their personal lives as much as you can. You know, pay attention to bullying. Pay attention to somebody who might be having a problem that's manifesting in some way and you can't figure it out. Teachers are professionals at learning of what's going on inside a child's mind, much better than a law enforcement officer and so forth. So utilize those resources to empower those students to tell you if there's a problem and then get them to help. So we want to first prevent any kind of act of violence. So that'd be number 1, is that prevention. Number 2 would be we have to train everybody in the school, from the principal to the pupil and everybody in between, on how we're going to react. We've been doing it in fire drills since our parents were kids. And I'll tell you an interesting fact. The number of people who died in a school fire for a purpose-built school is 0 since 1950. And we obviously know the number is much higher than that for an active shooter. because in schools they're made out of concrete and they have sprinkler systems, and we have fire drills every month as a kid, right? You remember that? I remember that. But only recently have we been doing active shooter drills and so forth. So we have to practice that run, hide, fight, and prepare our schools, our security, our police officers to work together in the event something tragic happens. So that prevention would be the second. And then the third thing would be, how are we going to recover from that and return to normal? So we want to make sure that we already have in place psychological and social counseling for everybody, not just the immediately affected students and or teachers, but their families, the first responders, the community as a whole. Everybody's going to need short-term and long-term care to be able to recover from that and return to the new normal that they have after that. So in New Jersey, to be a licensed security guard, whether you're armed with a firearm or not, you have to follow what's called SORA, S-O-R-A, Security Officers Registration Act. It's a newer law. If you look on the website for the New Jersey State Police website, you just Google NJSP space SORA, it'll take you to the website where you can fill out the application and do it. It is not the easiest thing in the world to understand. So part of my job is just to help my clients who want to be security officers in New Jersey just understand the process they have to go through. The goal of the process is to make sure that not just anybody can put on a uniform that says security on it, walk around with a gun, and potentially hurt somebody or try to enforce the law. So we make sure that we're vetting the people that are becoming security officers in New Jersey, because they could have access to sensitive equipment, sensitive information in protected areas such as airports, hospitals, and so forth. So we vet them, then we train them. We give them a very condensed 24-hour crash course of everything you would get in the police academy, from use of force to ethics to report writing to gang awareness to first aid to firefighting and all those different things. We give them a crash course in that. And then once they pass that, they get a number assigned to them that's unique for them for the rest of their career, and then we can kind of help them get placed with a licensed security company in the state of New Jersey to perform that function to keep us safe. Not only am I there from the beginning till the baby bird is flying, but I'm going to continue to nurture that bird, so to speak. I'm going to continue to help, because they still need to qualify on that firearm twice a year, just like law enforcement does. They need to qualify on any new weapon systems. If there's a change in the Attorney General's guidelines on use of force, reporting requirements, body-worn cameras and all that, I keep myself up on that so I can train any security guard in New Jersey for that. That is something I'm actually starting to do now, is reach out to security companies in New Jersey, because I really want to professionalize it. Because private citizens, they just see a person in a uniform with a gun. They may not know if that was a police officer who's had 6 months of training in an academy or a security officer who's had 3 days of training. They just know that they may not have had the experience that they wanted to have had. So my goal is to make the stories that people tell at parties when they are interacting with a security officer or police officer to be, that officer is professional with me. That's my goal. Yeah. So in reference to firearms for private citizens, okay, I've been around guns since I was 20 years old. I've been a firearms instructor since I was 27 years old. I'm going to be 52 in July. I've never seen a gun sitting by itself just fire by itself. Someone had to do something to fire that gun. Someone had to do something wrong if they fired it at the wrong direction. So the first thing I do is I teach safety. Respect the weapon. It is designed to kill people, so respect the weapon. I do believe that we should have more training requirements for people that are going to possess firearms in the state of New Jersey. Just like if you're going to go get a car, you have to pass a driving test, and you have to periodically show that you are still a resident of New Jersey. You have to periodically take an eye test and so forth. I do believe that we should have required training for someone who's going to have a firearm which can kill somebody. The reason I say that is I've trained since 2020. I've trained probably 400 or 500 private citizens, and the vast majority of them have no idea what the use of force policy is. They're clueless when it comes to when they can and can't shoot, and they have zero safety skills, let alone the ability to actually fire the weapon accurately at the person that is trying to hurt or kill them or their family members. So respecting the weapon, using it safely, and then learning how to use it effectively, and then storing it in a manner that will protect it from children, a burglar, but make it accessible for you if you need it in an emergency. Kind of like an airbag. I equate it to an airbag. Your airbag would be no good to you if it was in a trunk and just before you got into an accident, you had to take it and put it in the steering wheel. It has to stay in there, but those things are so protected that only a certain stimulus will make them function. That's the way I want the firearms for my clients, is that it's very protected, but when that stimulus is there, it's automatic like an airbag. So in law enforcement, as a use of force instructor, I always ensure that my students and other officers constantly evaluate the level of resistance that the suspect or suspects are giving us and make sure that our level of control is equal or just greater so we can gain that compliance, right? So there's a new tool, and I work for this company called BolaWrap, which the symbol is WRAP wrap.com. It's called BolaWrap. And what it's designed to do is to launch a 8-foot long piece of Kevlar. Just picture an 8-foot long string with 2 fish hooks, one on each side of it, right? It comes out at about 240, 50 feet per second. Optimum range is about 10 to 20 feet, and it's designed to wrap around a person's legs from their mid-thighs to their ankles or from their elbows to their wrists and pin the person together and tie them up so law enforcement can come in, grab them, put handcuffs on them without creating any injury. I have been wrapped over 100 times with 0 injuries. I've seen thousands of wraps applied in our multiple academies and training sessions that I've done with agencies, 0 injuries on that. The device is very effective and is called a force avoidance tool via remote restraint. So we don't even want to call it less lethal or non-lethal. We wanted to avoid force by creating that shock that sounds like a firearm went off. We want the person to go, oh, they feel something hit them. All of a sudden they can't move. And now my officers are in there, they grab their arms, put the cuffs on them, and nobody gets hurt. And when it's used effectively like that, we can avoid force by remote restraint. So one of the other career paths that I was fortunate enough to go down was called resiliency. And there's a company called Resilient Minds on the front lines. Now, just after I retired in 2018, the state of New Jersey made it mandatory for every first responder, well, first it was law enforcement officers, to go through resiliency training. And the goal of it is, law enforcement officers, they say on the average, experience 3 to 5 traumas every week. Seeing it from a motor vehicle crash with injuries, to somebody hurt themselves in the house, to a victim of a violent crime. And multiply that over years and years. And over 25 years, law enforcement officers and first responders have dealt with a lot of trauma. But we were never really taught with how to deal with that and how to get ourselves to heal from that. So that goes inside, it eats away, shortens your lifespan, it affects your relationships, and it can help you, it really can push you to make poor choices to cope with it, with alcoholism, using prescription drugs or illegal drugs, and so forth. So the resiliency program in New Jersey was created by the Deputy Attorney General. So I actually never had it. I retired before it became mandatory, but now every officer in New Jersey has had it or is about to have it. When he retired, he partnered with some people and made a company called Resilient Minds on the front lines. And we're expanding on the New Jersey resiliency program and giving it to everybody who needs it. We consider, especially after the pandemic, almost everybody at some point was a frontline worker, from a truck driver to anybody who worked in a hospital to people who were working in those businesses that had to stay open. Obviously, all of our first responders, police, fire, EMS, flight attendants. We're actually working with flight attendants who are getting a lot of pushback from the mask requirements and everything else to teach them resiliency, how to deal with what's happening, how to not internalize it, how to get help, where to get help. And we actually have the ability with Acadia Hospital on the East Coast and West Coast with doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists on our board to be able to take somebody who's suffering from the effects of trauma anywhere they are on that river, whether they're in the beginning of the river, in the rapids, or have already gone over the waterfall, we can get them help now if they need it. From counseling to inpatient abuse to I'm about to hurt myself. and everything in between. So as a police officer, I understand that there's sometimes animosity. There's sometimes a natural adversarial relationship between people and someone in authority. And that really shows its head, as we've seen on the media, between young black men in the inner city and law enforcement officers who are there trying to protect them. Oftentimes that protection can result in arrest and so forth. So there is that natural adversarial relationship. So one of the things that I do is I've created some podcasts and I speak publicly, and I'm actually going to be speaking at Rancocas Valley High School about this in May, is how especially a young black man can survive an encounter with a law enforcement officer and still maintain his dignity and his life, which is most important. So I'll touch on just a couple of the tips that I give really quickly. Is one, if the officer's not being the adult in the room, then you have to be the adult in the room, right? If he or she is coming off unprofessional, you just have to bite it, wear it. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy, okay? It's just like when I first learned verbal judo and I first learned that people could call me every name in the world as a police officer and I was not legally allowed to react. I'm asking you to do the same thing because your life depends on it. Is be the adult in the room. Let him or her call you whatever he or she wants. Most of it's probably going to be recorded. You'll be able to win that battle in court later. Yes, sir, no, sir, number one. Number two, no sudden movements. Don't move at all. Stop. What did they say to do if you caught on fire? Stop, drop, and roll. I just want you to stop if you're encountered by a police officer. And then ask, sir, what do you need me to do? Ma'am, what do you need me to do? Officer, what do you need me to do? I need your ID. Okay, my ID is in my back pocket. Do you want me to get it? You be in charge of it. Do everything nice and slowly. We do not want to give that officer a chance to have to make a mistake or draw his or her weapon or use force when it's not necessary. So if you listen to my podcast, if you come hear me speak at Rancocas Valley, you'll hear the whole lesson on how to survive an encounter with a law enforcement officer while maintaining your dignity and your life. Because I guarantee you, if that officer is unprofessional and that's on video, it will not fly and you will win that in court. We're going to talk about the 3 A's in surviving or preventing a carjacking. Number one is situational awareness. So we can't be doing this at the red lights or at the stop sign. We just can't. I know this phone is really exciting. I know it's really alluring. I know we want to check that message. I know we do, but your life is more important. So situational awareness, that first A in carjacking, is what we need to have, is situational awareness. Okay, I'm gonna make you a Secret Service agent is what I'm gonna do. Whenever you see the Secret Service and they're walking with their protectee, what are they doing? Are they texting? Are they doing down like this? Are they looking at their shoes? No, their heads are up, they're on the swivel, and they're looking around. They have that situational awareness. This next A is avoidance. We wanna avoid negative locations and we wanna avoid negative behavior. We wanna avoid that negative behavior of being on my phone when I should be up looking around. It's gonna make you a better driver because I don't care how good you are. When you look down at your phone, you look up, the light's green, you start to go, the situation may have changed. There may be another car that's about to run the red light and you can still get into a crash. So we want to avoid negative behavior and we want to do our best to avoid negative situations. Also, we want to avoid being so close to that car in front of us that we can't get around it if we need to get around it to escape something. And that last A would be action. We need to be ready to take action. And that action could be one of 3 things. It could be just comply. Okay, I'm going to give you my car. You notice I'm up. I'm talking to the suspect. I'm going to give you my car. Okay, just let me and my wife get out. Let me and my kids get out. I'm just going to undo my seatbelt, okay? I'm just undoing my seatbelt. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to let my wife get out first, then the car is yours. You have to plan this. I'm not making that up. I teach it, I plan it. I was on the news talking to the entire Philadelphia region about how to survive a carjacking. So that action may be to comply. That action may be to escape. It may be if I left enough room between my car and the car in front of me, or even if I have to scrape it. I know there's a lot of nice cars out there and we love our cars, but a car is a tool. A car is a tool. If you need it to get you and your family out of danger, I don't care what you have to scrape, bump, or knock down, get out of danger. Leave yourself an escape route to get out. So that might be your action. It might be to comply, it might be to escape, it might be to fight back. If you're legally allowed to carry a weapon and the situation justifies it, you may have to go ahead and draw and employ that weapon to protect your life or the life of somebody in your vehicle, not to protect your vehicle. Deadly force is never authorized to protect property, only life. So that last A action might be to comply. It might be to escape, or it might be to fight back. If you think this has changed from a property crime to a personal crime, or there's going to be kidnapping, or somebody's about to get hurt, we may have to secure that weapon. We may have to go for action and try to prevent that person from hurting us. I highly recommend everybody take a few self-defense classes so you have an idea of what that feels like. So awareness, avoidance, and action. The best way for people to find me is go to safetyman.co. Safetyman like Superman, all one word, .co with no M. Safetyman.co is the best way to find me, or you can call me directly if you don't want to wait. 609-975-9275. 609-975-9275, and ask for Safety Man.